Hello, I'm Matt and welcome to Badger Workshop. It's getting towards that magical time of year. So as I'm quite mean, I'm going to make some presents for my family. What I've got here is a couple of succulents and some bits of wood that were in the garage when I moved into the house. I was just going to chop them up and use them as firewood, but if I can turn them into presents, even better. So I've got myself a new 1/4 inch blade for the bandsaw, as I'm going to need to make some quite tight cuts. With the new blade installed, I can get one of these bits of wood cut in half. The plan is to make some blocks for these succulents to go into. They're already in pots with no holes in, so these don't need to be watertight. With it cut in half, I can then get both ends squared up. I can take the plant out of the pot as carefully as I can without getting soil everywhere. Then I can draw around this pot. So this is the tight cut I was talking about. It's a bit like making a bandsaw box. I just cut into the line I've drawn, follow it around, and then when I'm done I can carefully back the blade out. With the core removed, I can then get the plant pot put in, get that core put back in as a plug, and then get it cut flush. It now needs gluing back together. So in the kerf of the blade I get a little screwdriver pushed in so I can open that kerf up with enough room to get some glue in. With the glue pushed down into the gap, I can then get a clamp on the top, getting it pulled tight. The core can now be glued in, so I just get some PVA on and spread out. Then it can be put back into the hole and I can get a clamp on, and squeezing up that gap will just pull it tight. I leave it to dry for a couple of hours and then I've got a couple of blocks, but they're not very interesting, so I want to add a more geometric shape to them. I get the bandsaw table tilted to about a 30-degree angle. Then I can run the blocks of wood through the blade, cutting the corners off at that angle. When I've removed all the bottom corners, I flip it over and do the ones at the top. I get the table put back to 90 degrees and then start nipping some more edges off. I don't really have a plan here, I'm just experimenting, and I actually went back and tilted the blade again and cut some more bits off. When I'm reasonably happy with the shape I've got, I use the belt sander to sand those cuts and get rid of all the saw marks. To finish it all off, I just give it a couple of coats with Danish oil. And that's these planters done, from a simple bit of firewood to something I think looks quite cool. And now to get on with another project. So I thought, what's more Christmassy than candles? Well, probably lots of things, but they're still quite Christmassy. I've got this long thin scrap of oak I'm going to use as a tea light holder. For safety, I don't want to put the tea lights directly into the wood, so I've got these little inserts. I'll put links to them down below under hardware. When I've worked out the rough size I want these to be, I'm going to cut down to the length on the miter saw. I get them ripped down to the final thickness on the table saw, and while I'm here and got the fence in that position, I'm also going to cut down a bit of plywood. I'm going to need this plywood to make a template in a second. These inserts need a 41mm hole, and I can only find one drill bit in that size. Unfortunately it has this big point in the centre, and that really grabs the wood, so I'm going to make a template for it. First I'm going to work out where I want the tea lights to go. Then I can transfer those marks over to the bit of plywood. I can now drill these holes out in the ply. I'll put a link to this bit down below, but you could just use a readily available 42mm bit and they'd just be a little looser in the holes. With the template made, I can then use an Allen key and remove this central point. Now I can get the template clamped onto the oak, get that drill bit back in the machine and start using this guide to drill the holes out. Because I've removed that central point, it leaves these little pillars of wood in the centre, so they just need popping out with a chisel. Now that could be it done, but I want to make the shape a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to use a chamfer bit to add some detail. I go around the base in 2 passes, just to make the shape of this a little more interesting. With that done, I give it all a sand down, going up to 120 grit, and then it's time to apply some finish. I'm just going to use this hard wax oil again, because I liked it on the kitchen project. Just brush it on and leave it 4 hours between coats. With it all dry, just one last job is to stick on these little felt feet so it doesn't damage any surface it's put on. And that's it all done. These brass inserts fit in really nicely using that drill bit. So 2 Christmas gifts done. Let's just go for one more. So again, on my scrap pile I found this bit of wood, bit of oak with a nasty crack all the way up it. So what seems to be really trendy to make these days is charcuterie boards. Basically a flat bit of wood to serve some food on. So I thought I should be able to manage that. I get the edges cleaned up by ripping them down on the table saw and cutting to length on the miter saw, and then I can do something about this crack. I thought I'd have a go at actually making a feature out of it, so I'm just going to tape up the end with some aluminium tape, and then I'm going to fill it with some epoxy. As the crack is pretty shallow, I'm just using the glue I've got, so I'm mixing up a small batch and then I'm going to tint it. From the supermarket I picked up this black food colouring paste. I'm just mixing that in with the epoxy. I did quite a bit of research on whether epoxy is food safe, and the consensus seems to be if you're serving food on it, it's fine, but I wouldn't use it as a chopping board when maybe you could actually cut bits of the epoxy off and eat it. But please, do your own research on this. With it spread into the crack, I leave it to dry and then I can get the foil removed. Then it just all gets a sand down. I'm going to use the same chamfer bit to add a bit of detail to the bottom, just to make it look more interesting, but also it makes these boards much easier to pick up if you can get your fingers under them. One more detail that seems trendy with these boards is a way to hang them on the wall. I could just put a hole in it. I did think about using a strap of leather, but I'm going to bend a brass loop to put on it. This is some 5mm brass round bar that I get bent down to a loop, and then I can cut the ends down to they're the same length. I get the loop positioned centrally at one of the ends of the board, and then I mark out where the holes need to go to accept it. I get a couple of holes drilled out using the old tape flag stop technique to get the holes the same depth. To secure it in place, I'm just going to mix up another small batch of epoxy, but I'm not going to bother tinting it this time. Then I can get it poked into the holes and spread out. The loop can then be pushed in and tapped down into place. The last job is just to apply some finish, and I'm going for mineral oil as it's food safe. With the oil on, it really emphasises the black crack, and I think it's quite an interesting feature. And that's 3 handmade Christmas gifts all done. We have an oak charcuterie board with a black epoxy line going up it and a brass handle. A couple of geometric shape succulent planters. And again out of oak some tea light holders with brass inserts. I hope these have given you some ideas and you've got just over a month to get them done. Thanks for watching, thanks to my patrons, and please subscribe for more videos.